Owning a law firm literally kicked the shit out of me. There's just no other way to say it. I was exhausted most of the time. By the time I started a law firm, I had a pretty decent book of business. When I left the firm that I was at and started my company, I was generating about $600,000 a year in gross revenue from clients. And that was on reputation alone. No paid marketing, just people knowing me and referring to me. That was my book of business. Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Crushing Chaos with Law Firm Mentor podcast, where today we're going to talk about how to grow a $3 million law firm in 3 years. So someone specifically asked me to cover this topic, and I was a little hesitant when the request was made, frankly, because I hear a lot of people when they're asking for guidance, support, mentoring from law firm coaches and consultants. A lot of people have this attitude that basically says, give me the top tips and tricks as to how I can do it. Like, what's the magic secret, right? What are the top 3 things that you could do right now to instantaneously create? And I think we all intellectually know that there's a lot that goes into creating a business, sustaining a business, and growing a business. But there are some tried and true tested ways of growing and scaling quickly that I do want to talk about. And so I put on my reticence hat for a moment. And then I also weighed that against my desire to be of the ultimate support. So I said, okay, how can we talk about this in a way that doesn't give the impression that all you have to do is snap your fingers and do these top 3 things and poof, you will land there. There was a lot of work in my origin story, and there was a lot of trauma, frankly, in my origin story. And for those of you that have been following the podcast for any length of time, you probably know the story, right? But there are some of you that are new to the podcast, so I am going to share the story again in abbreviated form so that I can illustrate some of the things that I think a lot of people are really asking for when they asked me to talk about how to scale and scale quickly. So for those of you that are new to the podcast, please do follow us here on YouTube. We are on all of the podcast platforms, but all of the information that we share in video form and all of the substantive knowledge that we share in the form of our lives and various team members, including myself, sharing information about specific strategies around collections, around people, around marketing and sales, all of that lives here in our YouTube channel. So this is kind of the ecosphere where you can get the most substantive value from LFM and where you can learn the most about the company. So again, please do like, share, and subscribe. And now let's dive in. Okay, so I'm going to tell you the little backstory, and I say the little backstory, it's actually a big part of who I am and how we got to even creating Law Firm Mentor. But I want to share the story with you for those of you that don't know, because it very much illustrates the 3 things that we're going to talk about as to how you can create a $3 million law firm in 3 years. Okay. So most people know I am a practicing attorney, and I was, and still am, but primarily when I was just a lawyer and owning a law firm or starting a law firm before I had became a business coach, I was what you call a lawyer's lawyer. I loved lawyering. There are a lot of people that wanted to escape lawyering when they became coaches and consultants. They kind of said, it's an easier thing to do this over here. I'll teach people rather than do the thing. And I loved doing the thing. I have been a family law attorney with a focus on child abuse and neglect, parental representation for 2 decades. And that area of law was not just something I did to make money. It was something that I very much had a passion for and still do. Part of who I am as a person is very much defined by how I help people. And in this particular area, in the area of the law that I chose, I helped people every day. And I very much defined myself by my career. Now, I have grown quite a bit since I started lawyering. So I, of course, now define myself by things outside of my career. But once upon a time, my career was it. And very much by choice, by design, I was not a lawyer that slaved away, felt trapped by the golden handcuffs, or felt I had no value in life outside of my work and therefore was a workaholic. I just loved my work. And so the part of my work that I loved the most was being in court. I just, there's nothing better than cross-examining someone. And there's nothing better than the oral argument and the presentation of information and advocacy. I happen to find it very fulfilling. So, when I decided to create a law firm, it never occurred to me that I would have to give up or cut back on that part of what I loved about the law so much, which was being in court. I very much thought, okay, I'm going to have to do a little bit less so that I can run the office. But for the most part, I'll go lawyer and I'll hire people to run the office. And I set out initially with a partner, but we separated pretty quickly and amicably. And then I'm off on my own. And it was an experience I was just not prepared for. Owning a law firm literally kicked the shit out of me. There's just no other way to say it, right? I was exhausted most of the time. By the time I started a law firm, I had a pretty decent book of business. When I left the firm that I was at and started my company, I was generating about $600,000 a year in gross revenue from clients. And just that was on reputation alone. No paid marketing, just people knowing me and referring to me. That was my book of business. And so, I didn't think about marketing and selling when I first got into business. I thought about just continuing to do what I was doing at somebody else's employment just for myself. And all of the things that you have to learn to be the CEO of a law firm, negotiating the contracts, signing the leases, the fee structures, taking in the money, organizing the money, making payroll, hiring people, all of that, I never really gave much thought to, which sounds very ignorant now in retrospect. But at the time, I just thought you did that, right? Oh, you go into business, you hire somebody, you tell them what to do. They're good at it, and all is right with the world. And that it was not my experience. And I was working anywhere from 60 to 70 hours when I first started my law firm. And very quickly that swelled. And I was somewhere around 80 to 90 hours a week by the time things kind of went off the rails. So ultimately, my pattern was I had hired any number of people that just did not work out. And at some point, I was just so traumatized by having hired and fired so frequently that I said, you know what, screw this. I'm just going to be my own secretary for a while, just so I can catch my breath and have some competency around me. And then I'll get back to hiring a person for this. And so I would come into the office around 6 o'clock in the morning, sometimes 5, and I would be a legal secretary until about 8:30. Then I would turn on my lawyer hat. I'd be a lawyer until about 6 or 6:30 at night. Stop, have a quick dinner, shovel it in while I was going through the mail, and then get back to secretarial work until about 8 or 9 o'clock at night. And then I would get up the next day, rinse and repeat. And on Saturdays, I would come in and just do drafting work and the kind of work that I needed to be undisturbed for. Sometimes I would also see prospective new clients on the weekend. So, I'm kind of living that life for a while, and the exhaustion is starting to seep in, but I'm not really paying attention to it. I'm like, okay, some NoDoz, some very strong coffee, and we can power through this. We're only, a few weeks away from getting to that place, that magical place where we will be caught up and we can take a breath and start to get a better handle on things. Well, as you know, there's no such thing as being caught up, at least not when you're in a growth spurt, which I didn't even realize I was in at the time until I kind of looked at my numbers retrospectively. But things were kind of crazy. And this one week, I was just exhausted. I was physically exhausted. I was mentally exhausted. And I was so overwhelmed. But Friday was my court day. Here in lovely New Jersey, motion practice in the family part happens on Fridays. So I happened to have 3 motions scheduled in 3 different counties, and I was going to juggle my calendar the way that I always did so I could show up for my clients. And as luck would have it, earlier in that week, really around Thursday, we had kind of gotten to the point of we knew what was going to happen on Friday. But earlier in the week, things started happening where Some cases are being negotiated and the court is having some conversations with us about maybe we can't have you in on Friday. But ultimately, by midday Thursday, I knew that I was going to have Friday completely in the office. And that was such a treat for me. Not because I didn't love being in court. I mean, that was my happy place. But at the same time, I had so much paperwork that was getting that was getting backed up. Clients are calling and emailing and they're pissed off that something hasn't been responded to yet. And I'm getting adversaries calling, why aren't you responding to this letter? And, the court is saying, hey, I need you to file this thing. So I had so much to do that I thought, okay, great. God has given me a gift and here comes Friday and I'm going to be in the office all day Friday. So I am so excited by the middle of the day on Thursday that I said, let me work a little bit later on Thursday. And then Friday, I am going to really dive in and get caught up. Right? So Thursday, the plan was, I will just work a little bit later and then I'm going to treat myself to sleeping super late on Friday to 7 a.m. And then I'm going to go into the office and work, and I'm only going to work until maybe 6 or 7 p.m. So I'll have a reasonable work day of anywhere from 12 to probably 10 to 12 hours. And then I will kick it back into high gear over the weekend, right? But I'll give myself that rest. Right. So I'm so excited about this that I work super late on Thursday. And if you know anything about when you're anticipating something, there's almost like this surge of energy that comes into your body. You kind of tense up waiting for the moment when you can actually release all that tension and rest. Right. So I am working extra hard and building up all of this momentum on Thursday for Friday. Well, I stay later and later and later, and it gets to be very late. And at some point, I'm like, okay, I'm barely functional at this point, but let me get in the car, drive home. At that time, I lived about 45 minutes away from my office. I know, probably thinking, how the hell do you own your own law firm and you chose to live 45 minutes away? I actually was in a lease at the time that I started my law firm and separated from my partner. So I hadn't moved yet, but it really was my plan to move closer to the office. But so anyway, I get in the car and I am just thinking about the bed, and I am so excited to be thinking about the bed that I'm just kind of like, I'm holding on to the steering wheel. I wish I could like post that little meme, with the woman that kind of looks like, what's her name? Like, Drusilla, right? With like the bug eyes and the hair is flying back and she's holding onto the steering wheel and the steering wheel is shaking. She's driving so fast. That was kind of me. I'm like driving faster and faster and faster. And I've got the window down and I'm blasting Pink, Blow Me One Last Kiss. Okay. I still remember it like it was yesterday. And I am just, we're going to get there. We got to get there. We got to get there. Cause I'm thinking about the bed. And if I could just get to the bed and get a good night of sleep and sleep until 7 o'clock in the morning, which for me at that time was a real treat. I'm like, okay, I can feel the rest coming. Well, unfortunately, the rest came a little early because at some point in time while I'm driving, I don't know, some ridiculously excessive rate of speed down the highway, I remember opening my eyes and I'm still in the car and I was centimeters away from a guardrail. And when, you hear that saying, Jesus, take the wheel. I truly believe that Jesus took the wheel that night because I have no recollection of how I didn't crash and die, driving into that guardrail. But somehow I see the guardrail and somehow I end up skidding across the highway to get away from it. There were some blaring horns because I almost hit someone. But thank God I didn't. Thank God I didn't hit anyone. And thank God I didn't die that night. But that was my wake up call. And that was the moment I said, this shit's for the birds. Working harder is not working. I can't do this anymore. I don't want to do this anymore. And literally, I just got out of the car. I start crying and screaming on the side of the road. And it's kind of like, God, expletive, expletive, expletive. And at some point in time, just that I've got to escape this, right? This law firm is going to kill me. And so the next day, I actually eventually calmed myself down. I mean, I was pretty hysterical when that happened. Calmed myself down, got myself home, did get a reasonable night of sleep. And the next day, before I did anything, I just started messaging some of the biggest law firms in New Jersey. My history is not at big law, but I did end up building my career at the firm that was the largest law firm in the county where I worked at the time. So just over 126, I think 126 employees was where we were when I left the firm. And of course it's gone on and become much larger than that even now. So, but at the time, I knew the corporate structure. I knew the comfort of having rules and policies and procedures and organization and charts and all of that. So that's kind of what I looked for. And I just offered to sell myself to the highest bidder. Set up interviews at all of the firms. I knew all of the managing attorneys in the family law departments for all of those firms. So it was really just a matter of placing a call and saying, hey, I'm up for grabs. I had that status in our state at that time. And I was raring to go. I was raring to get rid of this piece of junk, this jalopy that I had created called a law firm. Ultimately, I didn't do that. I won't go into all the details, but I was on the cusp of getting the offer of a century, and I essentially, once again in the car, driving to receive the offer, said, I don't want to do that. So I called my mentor and told him, hey, this is going to be really bad. I'm sorry, but I can't do this. And lo and behold, I kept my law firm. So how did I survive the trauma of that? I'm not talking about the car, but I'm talking about the experience, right? The experience of starting a company and believing that all that I'm going to do is just lawyer elsewhere, right? And I considered myself, and still do, very blessed and lucky that I didn't have the experience that a lot of law firm owners have. In fact, I'd say probably more than not, which is having to figure out how to get clients. I had already kind of bested that. I had figured out who I needed to talk to, what stages I need to get on, how to network, all those things. And networking for me was pretty shocking because I was very introverted. I still am. And at that time, I was also very shy. So it took a lot for me to build a reputation in a book of business, but I had done that. So I'm thinking this law firm ownership thing is not that hard, right? You just, open up a business and open up a business account and start taking money and, poof, right? And it obviously is a lot more than that. So I think back on those days and kind of laugh at my younger self and say, oh, God, honey, what were you thinking? But anyway, when I distill my life experience of owning a law firm and creating it and having it damn near kill me and then having to keep it or choosing to keep it and figuring out how to scale it, the question is how? And it really boils down to these three things. So the first thing was to get myself out of chaos, right? We talk about here at Law Firm Mentor that we help law firm CEOs to grow their revenues, crush chaos in business, and make more money. And that crushing chaos piece is essential. It is central and essential to being able to have a sustainable business. You have got to get yourself out of chaos. And chaos doesn't look the same for everyone, but it typically means working too hard, having so much on your list of things to do that you can't ever feel that you are caught up, that your days run you and you don't run your days, that your calendar runs you and you don't run your calendar, that people have access to you all day, every day, stopping into your office to ask questions, emailing you and expecting an immediate response, calling you and expecting an immediate answer. That type of I belong everywhere all the time and I'm never in a state of linear thinking is the experience that my life has taught me that most law firm owners go through. And many lawyers go through it, even working at law firms, whether they are partners, associates, interns. It doesn't really matter, right? We're kind of taught to just be in a chronic state of putting out fires. And you have got to escape that. You have got to impose a structure upon yourself and systems upon yourself so that you can create structure and systems around your company. And if you do not do that, you're at risk for grievance and malpractice. You're at risk for burnout and a host of other foibles, right? Substance abuse, alcoholism, depression, and just being miserable in your day-to-day experience, which is something that I firmly believe that none of us is designed to experience, but that is something that we are praised for experiencing. So definitely got to get out of that, right? Systematizing, very first thing I did to get myself out of chaos. Okay. The next thing, of course, when we're talking about scaling, you're talking about growing. How do you grow and grow quickly? Marketing and sales, right? Marketing and sales is where it's at because you don't make money unless you have people to sell to, and you don't have a consistent recurring theme of revenue that's available to you unless you are on a regular basis marketing and selling to people who are in your pipeline. So for me, the marketing and sales piece was an easier piece, but it isn't necessarily easy in a company setting, right? So like most lawyers, I only had to promote myself when I was a lawyer. When I became a law firm owner, I'm thinking, okay, I bring in the clients and then I'll hire an associate and then my associate will do work that I delegate to him or her and we're off and running. But the problem is I had done such a great job of marketing me that people didn't want my associates. They wanted me. And every time that I gave work to an associate, it had to ultimately come back to me. So it might be that my associate is drafting a motion, but I had to review it. I had to sign it. My client had to hear my voice. My client had to hear my advice about the motion. I had to be the one in court to deliver it. And that didn't really give me the level of relief that I wanted. A whole lot of partners in law firms have that experience where the associates are the help, right? And there can be, depending on how you structure your work, how much work you have, there can be a system whereby the partner is the primary face and the associate is the extension of the partner. But the challenge becomes when you're running a business, you don't have time to not only take in the work and funnel the work and lead the work and strategize the work, but also give out pieces of it and get it back to have to supervise the work while you are also doing all of the other things of running a business, creating the budget, managing the systems, paying the bills, dealing with accounts receivable, selling the new prospective clients, marketing to the new prospective clients, right? There's so much that's involved. You really don't have time to have work go out and come back to you. And for me, and for many people I know, that didn't provide me any level of relief. So I had to learn how to market differently and frankly, better, much better. And it took a lot more skill for me to promote someone else other than myself after I had learned, much to my own shy, insecure chagrin, how to market myself. I now had to shift that, break that mold, break that pattern, and start marketing other people, and start marketing a company, and start marketing a system, and start marketing a process, and start marketing a group. And that was an intense challenge because it really challenged me at the level of my ego, right? And a litigator, right? Okay, I love being in court because, and you notice I said earlier, I like to cross-examine people, right? When you're cross-examining, who's in charge? Who is the person the court is listening to? You're telling the story. The person on the witness stand is almost ancillary to that, right? You already know what they're going to say. You already know where you're taking them. You already know where you're leading them. You are the one that's taking up space. You are the one that's puffing your chest out. You are the one that the court is listening to. They're just kind of saying yes or no, right? If you're structuring your cross well. And if you're controlling the witness well, but that's a whole other discussion, right? So I was used to being in charge. I felt comfortable being in charge, but as the person who is the star, I now had to find a way to make someone else, and that someone else isn't an individual, that someone else is the value system of my company that I'm selling to new clients. I had to make that someone else, that mythical other that's not me, more important than me. And to me, that felt very diminishing, right? Because I'm thinking, I'm the star. I want them to want me. And now all of a sudden, I am trying to convince them not to want me. And so I did what most lawyers do. I would say things like, okay, you're going to work with my associate, but don't worry. I'm still here. I'm supervising, right? And intellectually, I justified that with, well, they want me, so this is a way for them to get me. But the reality is, it was much more about me wanting to be wanted than it was about them truly wanting, because people want what you sell them, right? We learn all the time what to want. We learn it from the media. We learn it from sales conversations. We learn it from marketing presentations. We learn it from data all around us, right? You might leave your house going to a car dealership, planning to get yourself a certain type of car, in love with the idea of a certain type of car. And then a salesperson gets a hold of you and they start asking you some probing questions about what you want to feel, what you want to experience being in that car. And this car over here is better, faster, cheaper, or it's better, faster, and more prestigious if it's an eco thing, or it's better, faster, and gets better mileage, or it's safer, whatever the thing is that matters to you. And then all of a sudden you want that car, right? You don't want what you came in looking for. And that's good salesmanship. But I wasn't concerned about good salesmanship because I wanted to be the star, right? Because that's what I learned, right? Good litigators, we're the star, right? So I had to break the mold of being myself in order to sell my company or sell prospective clients on working with members of my team, people who were just as capable and sometimes not as capable. And that's the part that really sucks, right? Because a lot of us will say, well, if I hired a lawyer that was 10 times better than me, of course I would be able to sell my prospective clients on that person. But what if I hired a first-year associate? I can't say that person's better than me, can I? Well, you probably can't if what you're selling is how great you are, because then you're comparing yourself to someone else. You're not selling your prospective client on the vision of working with you. Okay. So that marketing and sales piece, really critical to being able to create a company, especially one that runs without you. And one that runs without you is essential if you are going to truly crush chaos in business and not be tethered to your work so that you can really function as a CEO. All right. Third thing that you have to master if you want to build a $3 million law firm in 3 years. Okay. Now, by the way, these numbers were my numbers. Okay. 3 years, we got to about $3 million. Beyond that, you can continue to grow and scale. You can continue to evolve. But I just want you to have the principle of it really isn't that hard to get there if you're doing the right things. So that's why we're giving you these strategies today. All right. The last thing, and this is really required to get yourself over 7 figures and to keep growing beyond that. I had to get better people. And here's the thing that's really tough about that. It isn't just getting better people. It's getting better expectations of every person that works in your company. One of the things that I struggled with, and that I know a lot of law firm owners struggle with, is holding people accountable. Because if you're not exceptional at everything that you do, then you look at other people, and when they are not exceptional at what they do, you tend to let them slide. You tend to say, well, I get it. It's hard to call clients for money. So if you can't do it, I wasn't that good at it either, right? So you give grace and space to others saying, well, I'm not good at that. So how can I really be mad at you for not being good at that? Or you look at people and you say, well, this person's not good at XYZ, but I don't have time to teach them. I haven't given them the roadmap. I haven't given them the step-by-step process. I am not a good enough leader. So therefore, I can't really expect them to be good at this. And so you let expectations slide down and down and down and down and down. And what ends up happening then is you end up with a mediocre outcome when you are holding a person to a standard of perfection that you are striving for in yourself and recognizing that you can't meet. Here's the problem. You're never going to meet perfection, as is everyone around you, right? No one is ever going to be perfect, but you can, as the leader, say, these are the attributes that you must be able to master in order to work here, and you must be exceptional at it. There are things that you are exceptional at that no one else in your company has to be exceptional at, right? You have to sell prospective clients. You either have to sell them yourself or hire a salesperson who sells them or delegate a attorney on your team who sells them. Somebody has to be making sales in your business in order for you to stay in business. If you said, I'm not good at selling prospective clients, but it's perfectly fine for my salesperson to also not be good at selling prospective clients because I'm not good at it. Well, what happens? You've hired somebody, you're paying someone, you're rewarding someone for a job that they're not doing, right? If you have decided that you're not going to do a job, that does not mean that you should relieve people that you have hired to do that job of doing that job. It is still their job, right? When you hold people to a standard that is rooted in yourself, i.e., I can't hold you accountable for not doing certain things because I'm not good enough. What you're ultimately doing is you are delegating to another person all of the benefits of being you without any of the detriments, right? Because if you don't sell a prospective client, you don't eat. But your salesperson, if they don't sell a prospective client, you're still going to pay them, right? So they don't have that same consequence that you do. If you're not good at paying bills on time and you delegate that to a bookkeeper or a fractional CFO, and that person's not good at paying bills on time, your credit is the one that is damaged, not theirs, right? So you cannot hold people to a standard that you yourself can't meet and say, as long as I can't do it, I'll pay other people and let them not do it also, right? So you have to have better standards, but then you have to actually get to having better people. And this is where it becomes really tough because for a lot of us, we start our companies, we create relationships with people, and they are loyal to us and we are loyal to them at the inception. So we think they're going to be with us all on the journey throughout the entirety of however long we own a law firm, right? They're going to die working for us. And then we realize the company has outgrown them. Well, what then? What tends to happen then is we tend to say, oh crap, this person's not really good at this thing over here. Let me give them something different to do, right? And you continue to shift and shift and shift, and you maybe demote them and you move them around. And ultimately you realize, and they realize, that they are floundering, that they're not suitable to the company that you have now. Even though they were suitable to the company you had before, when you first started, the company has evolved and they haven't, and they're not suitable anymore. And it hurts to let go of those relationships. It feels like a betrayal. It feels like a lack of loyalty. So a lot of people will hold on to team members that are just not suitable anymore. And until you get into the habit of looking at people's performance against the standard that you have established for their role, rather than against the feeling of how loyal they are to you and how much you would like to keep them, if you don't get to that point, your company will always flounder. And you're then going to be putting at risk not only your company, but every person associated with it. You're putting your clients at risk. You're putting your other team members at risk. You're putting yourself at risk. And essentially, you're putting your license at risk, right? So you have to think about it that way and realize that you are serving a greater good by letting go of people and releasing them to be their best selves wherever that is. But if you hold on to people, you are doing that for your own selfish reasons. You're doing that because it feels better than having a difficult conversation. It feels better than letting go of a person that you genuinely care for. And the more you do that, the more you accept that, the lower the standard of excellence in your company. Now, the last thing I want to say about this is that when you are bringing people in, there are going to be times where the market just does not have a glut of what you are looking for. Sometimes it's a buyer's market. Sometimes it's a seller's market, right? If you sense retraction in the market, right? And we are in somewhat of a state of retraction right now in the marketplace, right? There are fewer lawyers graduating historically than we've had in quite a while. And so now there is a race to try to get the people that are here to actually come work for you, instead of saying, I'll just train up the next lot of folks that are coming out of law school, right? But the thing of it is that when you look at the marketplace, there are going to be times where you're not going to find the A+++ player, right? You have to have somebody come in, and you're going to have to make some compromises. And this is where it gets really challenging, because most people that really pride themselves on being really great at lawyering don't want to hire anyone who is not also really great at lawyering. But here's the thing. You need to set a standard for your company, and that can be a high standard. But that standard cannot be you. You cannot say everyone has to be as exceptional as you are at fill in the blank in order to work for your company. Because if you take that position, you're leaving out the fact that there is a bell curve, right? Some people, very mediocre to the point of being inadequate at the far end of one end of the bell curve. Then you have a whole bunch of average folks in the middle, and then you have those exceptional rock stars. That's a very small pool in the exceptional category. Now, I'm not telling you to go out and hire just anybody who is inadequate and can't do the basic job. But one of the things that you will see, especially when you are kicking off your scaling journey, is that there will be times where if you don't get bodies in, you are missing dollars in opportunity. And here's the thing. You can't retroactively make money. This is one of those things that I talk about a lot when I talk about billable hours, right? Whether it's flat fee or contingency or subscription, billable hours is kind of the example that we're using, but it really applies to anyone, right? If you miss the opportunity to make $1 today, that opportunity isn't guaranteed to you tomorrow. So when people don't bill enough hours, and then they say, oh, well, I had to go on vacation, or, oh, it's the holiday, or, I had a relative come in from out of town or whatever. And they're not caught up on where they're supposed to be relative to whatever standard you've created. And they're like, oh, I'll just make it up later. Well, what ends up happening is they do the minimum on cases, right? And all of that opportunity that could be creating more, that could be billing more, that could be adding more value to clients that you would be paid for, those opportunities are lost. And then the case settles itself, or the matter resolves itself at a trial or whatever. You don't get to go back and bill someone for work you didn't do, right? So you missed all that opportunity. And tomorrow, those cases may not be there. So it's the same general thought with everything when you're talking about productivity, especially with people. You need to get the work done, and you need to make the money today so that you have the reservoir tomorrow to shoulder economic downturns, to be able to hire up the food chain, to be able to get better talent in. Sometimes you are doing a little bit of bootstrapping. You're saying, I will take Mr. Right now until Mr. Right comes along. That is the nature of running a business. And unfortunately, a lot of people are just not willing to do that. So they say, I'll just stagnate until I can find the exceptional person. And that person never comes. And by the time that they realize that person's never coming, or that person, they can't afford them by the time that that person shows up, it's too late. So those are the three things that I was able to do in order to grow a $3 million law firm in 3 years. And those are the things that I want to urge you to put into your list of requirements for yourself. If you are going to scale your law firm, you are going to need To crush chaos, i.e. systematize, you're going to need to master your marketing and sales so that you have consistent, predictable, recurring revenue. And you're going to need better people. All right, everyone, you are tuning in to another episode of the Crushing Chaos with Law Firm Mentor podcast. I will see you on our next episode.